then 2 bandits were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by derided him, shaking their heads and saying, "You who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross." In the same way, the chief priests also, along with the scribes and elders, were mocking him, saying, "He saved others. He cannot save himself. He is the King of Israel. Let him come down from the cross now, and we will believe him. He trusts in God. Let God deliver him now, if he wants to, for he said, 'I am God's Son.'" The bandits who were crucified with him also taunted him the same way. From noon on, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. And about 3 o'clock, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, "Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani," that is, my God, why have you forsaken me?" The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God. I'm grateful for the ministry we get to do together. But first, I want to start by saying thank you. Because a little over a year ago, Ignite had their first worship service. And simply put, we wouldn't be here today without all of you, without all of your prayers, without your gifts, without your encouragement and your hope. We wouldn't be here. And I'm grateful for all of you because it's been a vibrant ministry that is exciting. And if you had a chance to check it out, I'm excited that we've been able to reach new families and new youth and new children. We've been able to touch other people's lives and make a difference in our little community. Through our 5th Sunday service days, we served over a dozen different work sites and helped people's lives. We served in nonprofits and we've repaired people's homes. And all that is a testament to your witness and your willingness to let some crazy young people try something a little weird. And so for that, I am very thankful. I'm thankful that you would give us a chance and give us a chance to keep doing that ministry together. Because ultimately, we're serving the call of Christ here together, and we're following in the good witness and good story of everything that's been the First United Methodist Church in Great Prairie for over 100 years. So thank you for that, and thank you for all that you've done to help us walk along our way. I'm excited that our sermon series today is another in the 7 last words of Christ. And today, we're covering that word, my God, why have you forsaken me?" It's weird and it's uncomfortable to think about Christ saying that on the cross. It's hard to think about Christ saying that on the cross. And these words hint at a controversy that we don't often think about, but that was the biggest fight in the early church. Because the biggest fight in the early church was not about what color to make the carpets. It was not what to paint the walls. It was not what type of music or who should preach or who shouldn't preach. It was not any of those things. But the first big fight in the church was over who Jesus was. Was Jesus divine or was Jesus human? Was he fully divine or fully human? Was Jesus just a spirit that seemed human, or was Jesus just a human that knew a lot of God, knew a lot about God? And this fight went back and forth, and this fight even bled into our Gospels, because John and Luke are very steadfast in that Jesus is divine. I don't think any of our 4 gospel writers thought Jesus was only one or the other, but they definitely hinted that they favored one over the other. And so John and Luke believe that Jesus is divine, and that's why you get statements like, "Father, forgive them," from the cross, because that's something we would hope God would say. But then Matthew and Mark very much believe that Jesus was human. And that's why when you read Matthew and Mark, they only say one thing that Jesus said on the cross. My God, why have you forsaken me?" And they think they chose that because it's so very human. It's so very human to feel that emotion and feel that in that place. It shows us who Jesus is. I can't imagine any other emotion in reality when you're hanging on a cross, facing death through pain and torture. How could you not feel abandoned? How could you not feel forsaken? So that's the fight this early church had. Ultimately, the early church came to the decision that Jesus was 100% human and 100% divine, and you don't need a math degree to know that 100 plus 100 does not equal 100. And so it's confusing. How is Jesus both at the same time? And the truth is, I don't know. I am grateful that God is infinite, and I don't know everything about God. And so that's one of those mysteries I'm going to leave not knowing. But it's a mystery. And that's what we're getting into today with this Bible verse. Because in the moment on the cross, I think Jesus knew. I think Jesus knew that he was not alone. In truth, he felt abandoned. He felt broken, and he felt lost. And I like it. I don't necessarily like that, but I identify with it because it feels so identifiable. In that moment, Jesus felt broken. Jesus felt lost. In truth, that's what makes it so real. And this moment is important because, friends, we serve a God that knows. We serve a God that knows what it's like to feel lost, that knows what it feels like to be abandoned. We serve a God that even knows what it feels like to be at the very end and to feel like God has left us behind. And this is so powerful because we've all felt this at different moments. You may even think of a moment in your life where you have felt forsaken. One of the moments I remember is back in 2012, but to tell the story, I have to start in 2011. Nikki and I started the adoption process in 2011. We had decided that we didn't want to have a child, we wanted to adopt a child. And that's what we felt called to do by God. So we started that process in 2011 through a lot of prayer, a lot of hope. But it felt like we just kept running into roadblocks. It felt like everything we tried to do or tried to follow through with fell apart. We tried domestic adoption, we tried state adoption, and everything kept falling apart for us. We kept running into roadblocks. And it was so discouraging and so frustrating. But then we found international adoption, we connected with some people, but then we had to change lawyers because the first lawyer we talked with couldn't work with us. And we felt like God was leading us, but it kept falling apart. And the thing when you work with international adoption is you have to be ready to get phone calls late at night. And so as we were trying to adopt in Uganda, we knew if we were going to talk with our lawyer, it's going to be like in the middle of the night. And that's when the phone call happens. And so you're ready to not go to sleep well. And so we were always on edge and always waiting for that phone call because we had submitted all our paperwork, and coming spring of 2012, we started waiting for a match. We were praying and praying. We were praying with our whole church. We were praying with our whole family. We were just waiting, and week after week comes. So we keep talking to our lawyer about once a week. He's like, yeah, we just don't. Not yet. Not yet. And then finally on May 6th of 2012, we get a call late in the night. And he says, guess what? We have a match. We're like, yes. We have a 2-year-old boy who needs parents. We're like, okay, yes. We're so excited. We didn't sleep the rest of the night. And the next day we went to work, but we were on cloud 9. We started planning our travel. And we're like, well, this is how much money we've saved up. We can do some fundraisers. We started planning everything. Like, oh, we need to borrow luggage because we don't have enough. And we're going to be gone for that long. And we started planning. We started praying and hoping. We even had a picture of this child, and we were so excited. And then on Friday, May 11th at 2:37 in the morning, we get another call. And the lawyer calls and says, I'm sorry. An extended family member we didn't know about came forward, and he's going to take the child. And that's probably what was best for the child, but in that moment, felt broken. My God, we have to wait again. And we probably would have got through that moment okay. Except for the fact that 2 days later was Sunday, May 13th. And that was Mother's Day. And it just fell apart for us. I remember Nikki and I came to church that Sunday because we didn't know where else to go. And we went to that church we went to took communion every Sunday, and after we took communion, we went to the altar to pray. And we both lost it. God, why did you put this on our hearts if it's just going to fall apart again and again? It feels like all this is a treadmill of pain. To the point where we felt like saying, why, my God, why have you forsaken us? Before long, our church was surrounding us with hugging us and praying for us. But in that moment, we felt broken. Maybe you're thinking of a moment in your life. A time that a child was sick. A time that you were sick. Or a time you lost your job. Or you lost a home. A time where it felt like everything was falling apart. My God, why have you forsaken us? We knew in those moments that God was present. If you had asked me in my theological thinking brain, I knew God was present. But in my heart, I felt abandoned. In my heart, I felt lost. Moments like this are when I am most grateful for this verse. Because we serve a God that knows. We serve a God that has experienced this hopelessness. We serve a God that has felt this abandonment. Because, friends, while Jesus knew that he was not alone, in that moment hanging on the cross, he felt abandoned. And more than that, Jesus felt that the God that had been with him since the creation of the universe had left him. It's powerful. It's powerful that Jesus didn't just happen to him, but Jesus chose this. Jesus chose not just to listen to our sufferings and pain, but Jesus chose to experience the worst that we could go through. Jesus chose to experience the worst his children could go through. To fully experience that kind of suffering. Because, friends, this is the kind of king that we serve. A king who leads through suffering. A king who calls us to suffer alongside him. A king who calls us to suffer and identify with the poor and the needy, to serve and to give up our lives for those that feel forsaken. Because when we feel that way, we have the chance to be surrounded by love, and then our chance is to surround others that way. And that's one of the reasons I'm so grateful to serve with you in this church. I'm grateful to serve in a church that leads through service. Whether that means the many of you that give up your Saturdays to feed the hungry once a month, or the some of you that come up here to volunteer on Tuesdays once a month to give free vaccines to those that are needy. Whether that's some of you that gave up your Christmas day to serve those that needed a meal and didn't have anywhere else to go. Or it could be that you donated money to build a water well this Christmas for those that don't have clean water. Friends, I am grateful to serve a church that leads through service. And I'm grateful to be a youth minister of a youth ministry that leads through service. I was really grateful that this last summer our youth group went to the town of Farmersville. Greg and Ben went with us, and Ben's house was Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith lived in this big old wooden house that's not, it was one story, but it seemed like it was about 2-story tall, because it was just so tall. Right, Ben? It was 2-story? It was, okay, it was so tall. And he lived right on the main drag in Farmersville. And it was this old wooden house, and Mr. Smith had been sick for about 10 years. Because of that, it had started to fall apart. The paint was peeling, it looked bad, it was just an eyesore. And because it was on Main Street, his house was that house. That ugly house amongst all the nice houses, his was the ugly one. So he always knew with great shame that his house was that house. And so Ben and our youth showed up and got to work. They rolled up their sleeves and they started scraping and painting and scraping and painting and scraping and painting and more scraping and painting, right, Ben?
10 gallons of paint.
10 gallons of paint. They scraped and they painted. They did some woodwork. They did caulking around the edges so it was safe. But they did more than just that. During the day, they went to him at lunchtime. They brought him a lunch. They broke bread together. They also listened to his life story. They saw his hobbies. They spent time with him. They shared with him the love of Christ. They listened to his needs and they listened to his pain. Because, friends, being Christ is not just about paint, and it's not just about listening, but it's about both. It's about being there for people's physical needs and being there for people's emotional needs. And for Mr. Smith, our students were angels. Because by the end of the week, and Greg and Ben can tell you this is what happens on the mission trip, by the end of the week, they were these homeowners were blessed to serve, are so moved, sometimes they can barely speak because we've so changed their lives. And that's what happened with Mr. Smith. His house that was once that house now became a beautiful house on the street that he could be proud of. And there is no cost to there is no thing you can pay for that sort of change in your life. Because friends, that's what Christ calls us to. It's through service, through those that feel hopeless. I imagine Mr. Smith felt hopeless that his home would never be fixed, would never be right. But our students found a way. Because I'm grateful for a church that leads through service. And looks for the people in the world that say, my God, why have you forsaken me? And we are a church that says, okay, let's get to work. One of the things I love about this verse is that it's not just something Jesus said, but it's a song. So if I were to go up to you, this is responsive, so you all get to talk back to me here in a second. If I were to say, amazing grace, how sweet the sound, what would you then say? That's right. We all know the next line, right? And that's really cool. And if I was on my deathbed dying and I whispered, amazing grace, how sweet the sound, you would then think, oh, it's so beautiful. Even in death, he's thinking about God. But what we don't get is, my God, why have you forsaken me, is the first verse of Psalm 22, right before the famous one. It's the first verse of a psalm. Because the Psalms, which we read as Scripture, were just the song book for Israel. So while Jesus hangs there on a cross, he's saying the first line of a psalm. And I want to look at that psalm with you in Psalm 22. It's 31 verses, so I'm not going to read it all to you. But I encourage you to go home and read it. Read it tonight. Read it this afternoon. Spend time reading it when you're at home in the morning. Read through Psalm 22 because it's the song that Jesus was singing. And we're going to start in verse 1. We're going to hop, if you're going to follow around with me, we're hopping around a little bit. We're in Psalm 22. So starting in verse 1, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me? So far from my anguished groans? My God, I cry out during the day, but you don't answer. Even at nighttime, I don't stop. See, one of the beautiful things about the Psalms is that they're not just about celebrating, but we have songs and psalms for sadness. And this is a psalm of lament, a psalm of sadness that David wrote. We're going to continue in verse 16. Dogs surround me. A pack of evil people circle me like a lion. Oh, my poor hands and feet. I can count all of my bones. Meanwhile, the people just stare at me. They watch me. They divvy up my garments among themselves, and they cast lots for my clothing. But Lord, don't be far away. You are my strength. Come quick and help me. You can see why this is on Jesus' mind. This is written hundreds of years before the crucifixion, but it feels so apt. Finally, in verse 24, the psalmist writes, God didn't despise or detest the suffering of the one who suffered. God didn't hide his face from me. No, God listened when I cried out to him for help. I offer praise in the great congregation because of you. I will fulfill my promises in the presence of those who honor God. What's so amazing about this song is that it's a psalm of sadness and lament that turns to promise. What begins with sadness turns into the promise of God. That through suffering we are remembering the promise of God's love and God's presence. Because Jesus knew God was with him. And maybe though he felt abandoned, he started to sing this song so he could remember. Sometimes when I feel lost and struggling, I need to sing to remember God's love. And I think right here on this moment, this is the first verse of the song that was on Jesus' heart. Because friends, Jesus felt lost and Jesus felt abandoned. He felt broken, but in an act of worship, he was reminded of God's presence. He was reminded of God's love. Friends, unfortunately, we are not promised easy days. I can't tell you the next years are going to be easy or smooth or comfortable. I can't tell you that you'll never get to a moment again where you won't have to say, my God, why have you forsaken me? I can't promise that. In fact, you may be in a season of your life right now, this very moment where you feel forsaken and you feel lost. Maybe you came to church today because you feel so broken and lost, and you hoped that you would see a glimpse of who God is. So friends, my promise for you is this church and this community is here for you. That we are a community that serve God with love. That we serve, but we do that because we serve a King who knows. We serve a King who understands. We serve a King who has been there and done that. We serve a God who knows what it's like to feel forsaken, who knows what it's like to feel lost. We serve a God who's been there. And what I love about this is that we serve a God who never leaves us, especially when we feel forsaken. And that's the promise of the cross. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.